towns have got 2,000, 3,000, 5,000 folks. So you're right, they didn't. But to be perfectly candid with you, Hillary didn't campaign, and a lot of folks didn't like her. So
Yeah.
I think, but we learned a lesson from this. I promise you that. I promise you.
Yeah, absolutely. I
I
mean, realistically, if black folk came out in greater numbers in Miami,
Yep.
he could have took Florida. In Detroit, he would have took Michigan. I mean, she would have took Michigan. In Philadelphia, she would have took Pennsylvania. And in Atlanta, 500,000 black people didn't vote in Atlanta.
Well, the thing about the town right next to us, Lithonia, and Lithonia had 40% of its registered voters, purged. And nobody said a thing. And part of the reason why the mayor got defeated is because she didn't do anything to try and address it. They actually stole that election in Georgia. So
yeah. We can't give them no excuses.
No, not this time.
We need to have a mandate, a clear cut victory where even if he tries to play games with the courts, it's one thing if we're talking about the difference of one state making the difference in the electoral vote, then they'll play around and steal the election. But if it's 5 or 6 states, it's going to be hard for them to play them kind of games.
I think I actually do think, my friend, that in the vernacular of us heathens live on the street, it's gonna be an ass whipping. I really believe that.
That's what I'm hoping it is. That's what I'm praying it is.
No, you can't say that, but I can.
So. I'm praying it is.
Well, let me check and see what Matt and those guys are doing. Bishop, hold on a sec.
All right.
We're right here listening to an amazing conversation. Good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us thus far. I hope y'all are enjoying yourselves and are very excited to have you here today. Welcome to our second annual Black Men's Advocacy Day. This is our virtual edition. Unfortunately, due to COVID and other things in the air, thank you for socially distancing and not coughing on people and just protecting yourselves and by protecting others. Wear masks when possible, and that's why we're doing this virtually. I'm so glad to have everyone present. My name is Matthew Parker. I am the Director of Organizing for Union and Minority Neighborhoods. If you see my name in the emails, on flyers or whatever, thank you for seeing those, sharing those, and making sure that we are able to get things happening. Currently, we're going to talk with many of our elected officials today. We want to recognize those who are present. Thank you for those who are hosting with us, which is our Rep. Bud Williams, and then one of my favorite reps, Rep. Chanatala, and every other elected official and team who are present right now. Please give me a little message in the chat box privately so we can acknowledge you. Thank you for being present. Any issues, concerns that people have throughout the day, please ask questions in the chat box when possible. And then we'll also be monitoring this. This is also being shared on live on Facebook. So people might chat. We might get some questions and comments through there as well. So we're very happy to have a great day ahead of us. People will pop in and out throughout the day. We believe in quality, not just quantity, but we are very happy to see that there are plenty of people online and more people popping in as we speak. This waiting room thing is really happening, and we're just gonna have a great time. So good morning, everybody, just to start. And before we get started, my only ground rules are be mindful, be respectful. If there is a Q&A period, for folks, we just want to be able to say that we'll read the questions from the chat. And if anybody at their particular time does take Q&A, we'll ask that everybody take 20 to 30 seconds to ask your question or give response. That said, we're going to start with remarks from our Rep. Bud Williams coming from. You're right. I mean, so we're in the office. Shout out to our founder and executive director, Horace Small, who is not on camera right now, but definitely give me an earful. I want to recognize Bishop Talbot Swan, who is going to lead us in some opening prayer to start this morning, and we'll go from there. So, Bishop, anytime you're ready.
All right, let us pray. God of our weary years, God of our silent tears, thou who hast brought us thus far on the way, we beseech you this morning, even as we beseech our legislators for the purpose of empowering our community, that you would once again intervene into the affairs of men during a time in which we need you most. We pray your choice blessings upon those in leadership, that you would lead and that you would guide them, give them wisdom, give them clarity of thought, conviction of heart. We pray, God, for our government, Lord, that it would find itself on the right side of history. And Lord, we pray even now that you would continue to empower and inspire your people to speak loudly and boldly about the concerns of freedom, justice, and equality. We pray even now that you provide the resources so that we can educate our children properly, care for our seniors, and make our communities better places to live, work, and play. In respect to all other religions, I ask this in the matchless name of the one that I call Savior, Jesus the Christ. Thank God. Amen and amen.
Thank you, Pastor.
Amen. So, thank you all so far. Want to recognize some folks who are in the building. Recognize Boston City Councilor at Large Michael Flaherty is present. Representation from Councilor Andre Campbell's office is present, and Ed Flynn's office is present. So thank you, councilors, and your representatives being present. And then also City Council, Boston City Council, Julia Mejia as well. I'm glad that her office is present also. And then Rep. Vargas is present. So thank you all for being present this morning. And without much further ado, our co-host and partner in good trouble, Rep. Bud Williams, please give some words, Rep. Williams. Got to unmute yourself, sir. There we go.
I'm catching up with this technology. I apologize. First of all, good morning, and certainly we're very inspired. Our second annual Black Advocacy Day, and to my partner, Horace Small, brainchild that we talked about it a year ago, and this is our second year. Last year we had 300 to 400 activists in the community. And I want to give a special shout out to the posse from Springfield who always show up and they show out. This is the only thing, Matt, but your technology, I'm not that technology savvy, but I've learned in the last 48 hours, I've come leaps and bounds. And thanks for getting me in this morning too. This is a very, very important day and important time. By way of backdrop, I want to take 2 minutes. We thought we were on the right track until this pandemic came. The state budget is projected, depending on who you talk to, between $3 to $6 billion deficit. We have been operating on a 1/12 budget, and that 1/12 is supposed to expire on October 31st. We are still waiting to hear from the federal government. And I heard last night, maybe they have a deal with McConnell and Pelosi and our chairman, Neil. We're not quite sure. But until we get that money from Washington, most states are paralyzed. I mean, we just don't have the funding, and then it's the domino effect, affects all the cities, Boston, Springfield, Brockton, New Bedford, Lawrence, Lowell, Haverhill, all of them. So that's the backdrop. Money is short, so that's why this day is even more important. because we have to fight for our communities. We realize and we know in the worst of times, our people, Black and brown, in the urban communities, we suffer the most anyhow. And when things get really, really bad, we tend to be overwhelmed. So we have to fight. It's not business as usual. We don't want them to balance this budget on the backs of poor people, Black and brown. So we're going to have to step up and talk with leadership. That's why this day is way more important than it was last year, in my humble opinion. With that being said, I really think that this is the first, second year, but we're going to have another sit down, probably, because as we set the state budget this year, sometime within the next, hopefully, next 60, 90 days, January 1st starts another cycle all over again. So it's going to be back to back, and it's going to be war, because some programs are going to be cut. They're going to, I believe, balanced on the backs of the least of us. So we have to be prepared for the fight. I filed, along with my good friend Senator Collins out of Boston, House Bill 5199, which we had called an equity bill. And that equity bill, in my humble opinion, came the closest to reparations for Black and brown people in the communities. I want you to take a look at it. It's been filed. We did have a game plan to push it, but because of the resources, and we were thinking about taking money out of the rainy day account, the cannabis account, and also the casino gambling account to help fund this $1 billion equity bill. But it's reparations, House Bill 5199. And some of the points in it, it talks about $100 million in a resiliency program, which was similar to what Roosevelt did back when he was president. He put young people to work, talks about young people 17 to 26, getting them involved and working with the elderly, community service, fixing roads, fixing bridges, what have you, and pay them $17 to $20 an hour. We also talked about $50 million in incarceration, folks, getting people, when they come out of being incarcerated, that we have a pathway for them to be rehabilitated and to become outstanding citizens within their communities. Also, we talked about $300 million for small business grants, not loans, small business grants. We realize that our community is in disarray when it comes to economic disparities, health disparities, education disparities, low and moderate incomes, housing, every main category. And it's gonna take money to fix it. I mean, we march, we protest, Black Lives Matter. I think John Lewis would say the Black vote matters too. So with that being said, let's have a great day. We're gonna have some, you're gonna talk to economic development. There's some great legislation that's still in 6 conference committees. 6 conference committees. The police bill is still in the conference committee. The economic development bill, which has a lot of good things for the urban Black and brown communities. The IT bill, telehealth, the climate. They're all still in conference committee. And my point is that people are suffering. People are suffering. We need to move on these bills in committee so we can get some money in the streets. And the last thing, this pandemic, it has no clothes. We can see the disparities in healthcare. And the least of us have to. They can't remotely work from home. They can't social distance. They're on the ground floor, the grocery clerks, the bus drivers, CNA workers, healthcare workers. They're in the front lines. They can't work from home. They're in the middle of this pandemic. So let's get some help. Let's have a great day. I want to thank you Black men for showing up and showing out. This is great. It's fantastic. Again, Horace, thank you. And to Bishop Swan, who's been on board from this thing from day one. Thank you. And all you folks in Springfield, and put your name in that chat box. I know we reached out to the NAMVETS, Black Business Association. We reached out to Epilepsies, Minnemoka, Brother Keaton from the crew, my aide, Chief of Staff, City Council, Marlo Brown. So we have a good contingent, Minister Dave Lewis, who works with the mentally challenged. We have a big posse. We're going to keep this going. We know, as I said, it's going to be a tough year, and we need to fight for our communities. It can't be business as usual. So, Matt, I do thank you again for doing what you do, and let's get the show on the road.
Thank you for those words, William.
I forgot. Oh, wait a minute. I better give honor to China Tyler. Other than that, she won't let me back in Boston. my best friend in Boston, Representative China Tyler. Always a pleasure.
Yeah, because you know she'll get you.
Oh, absolutely. I know what you do.
All right. Thank you for that, Rep. Williams. I want to recognize Frank Baker, Boston City Council, and also our first speaker from her committee, Claire Cronin Rep. Cronin is also present. But before, we still got a few moments. Just want to acknowledge our other co-host, Honorable Rep. China Tyler. China, if you want to give a few words and welcome the folks and talk.
Can you hear me?
Absolutely.
Okay, perfect. So good morning, everyone. Happy Wednesday. I know that this is all one day as a COVID, but I just really honored and proud to be on this call. Most know me, but for those that don't, I'm Representative China Tyler. I represent Boston, the 7th Suffolk District, which includes Roxbury, Dorchester, Fenway, and the South End. Had the honor of serving my district in Boston and beyond for the past 2 years. Currently vice chairing the Public Health Committee, which is something that I'm super honored to do, and on a kind of more social level, chairing the Boston delegation. And I wanted to shout out to all my colleagues on the call, because as you guys know, doing this work on Beacon Hill is not an easy job. So I wanted to shout out to Representative Vargas, Representative Bud Williams, Madam Chair Cronin's here. I also wanted to give out a shout out to Representative Bud Williams, Representative Russell Holmes, who is not here as of yet, not sure where he is, but shout him out as well. And to all our colleagues in city government, we really appreciate you all joining, because we're learning from you, and you are helping us build what the future looks like for Black men and boys. Just for quick starters, a little bit introduction about myself. I'm one of 5 children. I'm the youngest, the only girl, and that leaves me with having the opportunity to be able to watch my mom raise all my brothers who are Black men in the city of Boston, with a lack of resources and a lack of education opportunities. And so seeing what my family had to go through really inspires me to do what I do today. I think some of my youngest memories are visiting, my family, my personal family at the Department of Corrections. And then today, to fast forward, as a state rep, having the honor to be able to deal with issues when it comes to mass incarceration in the Department of Corrections is something that, is near and dear to me. And so what I will say to all the Black men and boys on the call, even the ones that couldn't join, who hope to join, is that we love you and that we will not leave you behind. So, just a little bit about legislatively and what's happening on the Hill. I think Representative Bud Williams gave a good introduction as to what's going on. And I'll just kind of add on to that is that, bottom line, when it comes to data and talking about who we're talking about here, our universe of Black men and Black boys, across every issue area, Black men and Black boys have the largest disparities. And here on Beacon Hill in the State House, particularly in the House where some of this work has kicked off, we have provided some solutions to be able to address the disparities that Black men and Black boys face moving forward, with also being sensitive to the fact that we are letting you lead and keeping you in the forefront. And so one of the bills that we have here that is in the conference committee, which our Chairwoman Cronin is a part of, the Police Reform Conference Committee, is House Bill 168, which is to establish the permanent commission on the social status of Black men and Black boys. That is literally right there. And what we're trying to do is to be able to allow for you guys to address issues when it comes to any issue area, housing, education, public safety, public health, what have you, and really help us guide what policy in the future looks like so that we can close those disparities and close a lot of those gaps. They are unbelievable. And I want to get a little bit more acute on that conversation to talk about what exactly it is that we're talking about with some of these issue areas. And so we'll talk about prostate cancer, the #1 death cause when it comes to public health issue across Black men and Black boys. And I know that the Union of Minority Neighbors actually focuses on healthcare. So make sure that if you have breakout rooms and in the future that you're aware of how prostate cancer affects you and what can you do to prevent that with you and other Black men and Black boys in your families and your community and beyond. The second one is around the illegal trafficking of firearms. We have a huge gun violence issue here in the city of Boston, and the #1 victim of that by a 98 percentile, which is damn near almost 100%, excuse my language, but it's unacceptable, is Black men and Black boys. And so we're doing a lot on Beacon Hill to make sure that we try to do away with the illegal trafficking of firearms, because those firearms end up on the streets of our community. And what happens is that another mother, another father, another grandmother loses their son and they're not coming back. And we have to do everything we can to kind of cut that in half, with also making sure that we promote responsible 2A ownership. We're not trying to take guns out of the hands of people or not allow for you to be a gun owner if you could do so in a responsible manner. But once you become irresponsible, we have an issue because the Black community is suffering a great deal behind that. And just third overarching is like just access to opportunity. We have some of the hugest academic gaps when it comes to education and also when it comes to opportunity to careers in some of the new industries. We just kicked off the marijuana industry last year. We, as a legislature, we passed legalized the adult use of marijuana when it comes to Massachusetts. And what we're seeing is that upwards to 70% of the workforce is white men. And you talk about mass incarceration, you talk about the war on drugs, that number is unacceptable. And so we have some credible solutions to be able to cut away at making sure that we are fully able to participate in an industry that we had, been on the black ball in for years. And lastly, I want to talk about access to opportunity for workforce and development and careers. A lot of those careers, such as the police force, the firefighter force, a lot of the issues that we're having right now that are, sparking the Black Lives Matter movement and kind of pushing folks to, say, hey, no longer we're going to deal with this, is access to opportunity. And we're really, really in support of community policing and making sure that our firefighter cadets, our firefighters and our police department reflects our community, because that leaves less space and less room for error when it comes to community policing. And when I come in contact with the police officer, I don't feel as nervous or I don't feel safe. I was on a conversation last night with a couple of folks. The mayor had put together a police task force, and they came out with some recommendations for the city of Boston as to how they'd like to move forward with reforming the police department. And one of the bigger points was about the purpose of our police department is to be able to protect and serve. But the reality of it is that Black men and boys don't feel that that is equitable for them. And so we're trying to do what we can to address issues around equity and protecting and serving and making sure that everyone feels safe when it comes to our police force. And so right now in Beacon Hill, we have a big police reform bill that a lot of these issues that, are in the forefront of being discussed. One of which Chairman Gonzalez, who is the chair of the Black and Latino Caucus, and Chairman McCornan, who's on the call, are leading. And although they can't talk about it, just know that work is being done on Beacon Hill. And I'm very, very proud to be here and look forward to supporting this issue and beyond. Make sure that you get information around the Commission on the Status of Black Men and Black Boys, which is going to be chaired by a gentleman named Don Issa. And we're really going to get to the bottom of what are the issues that you want to bring to the forefront. And we'll be starting a new legislative session this come January. And we're really, really trying to make sure that all policy that we put forth is informed, particularly around Black men and Black boys. And so I thank everyone for joining. Good morning, and I look forward to supporting you in the future. So thank you.
Thank you for that, Rep. Tyler. Always keeping us informed about what's happening and things that are taking place and how we can support and get behind some of those bills, and just keeping us informed about what's happening up the hill. We appreciate you for that. I just want to give a few words before we pass it on, and with our person from the committee, our first committee up. I just want to let folks know the biggest purpose why Union Minority Neighborhoods takes on this call to bring people together and in this particular instance, bring the brothers together is because we recognize that the budget, the state budget, a lot of local budgets, and a lot of things that take place always happens on the backs of Black folks, of poor folks, of folks who don't have enough as is. That's why when Rep. Williams was saying earlier, programs get cut, those things affect our communities first. We recognize that, and we think that it's important to get people informed and also collaborate with those who are willing to step up, train, advocate, and work together to really push the agenda for what's important for us. There's many times where something may happen, and if we're not speaking at the table, we're going to be on the menu. And we see that happen time and time again, and especially with what's going on with us as a nation, small communities, large communities, across the board. There's a time where you just can say, all right, that's it. We're stepping forward. Or as my brother James Mackey will say, enough is enough. Shout out to my brother Mackey, who's on here as well. It's really important for us to make sure that when enough is enough, that we know how to stand up, we speak back, and we create these platforms where folks who are in positions to speak for us, to work for us, to draft legislation, to work on bills, to navigate political systems, to keep our interests at heart. And it's really important that we take the time to speak with them, ask them those daunting, those challenging questions to make sure that they do fall through on those things that affect us most. It's more than enough that we see how people are fighting and parties and partisanship and all that stuff. And it's like, why do we have to suffer because everybody doesn't get along? This is a perfect start, at least at the local level, which affects us most, to be able to work together and figure out ways and steps to communicate our needs, things that are happening in our community. So the folks who are fighting for us, who are representing us, are held accountable to speak what we're saying, not just speak what's popular in the moment. And I think going forward, if we can continue these kind of conversations and continue these kind of outlets, we can definitely affect the change that we want to see and have equitable results that will balance out what we have going on in our communities, because that's where it all starts at. So I thank y'all for y'all time, y'all energy, your efforts, and to always remember, like, it doesn't just start with showing up to a meeting. We got to do a lot more than just that. And so even we're going to pivot off of this and continue like right after election and just keep momentum, keep busy, keep things going. Because it's important to not do the work just showing up one day, but showing up many days and continue the conversation and continue driving and making sure that our voices are heard and our work isn't just in vain. So again, thank y'all for listening. And without further ado, I want to make sure that we continue the conversation, keep things going. And right now we have up from the Judiciary Joint Committee, the House Chair, Claire Cronin. I'm looking for you. Oh, there you go. So I'm gonna ask you to unmute and just pop one in with us.
Hey.
Good morning. How are you doing?
And thank you so much for inviting me to this call. Proud to be here with my good friends and my House colleagues, Representative Tyler and Representative Williams. I believe Representative Vargas is on the phone as well, although I can't see him on my screen. So I apologize. I'm having a little technical difficulty right now as we speak. Hello.
Yep,
sorry about
got you. Go ahead.
Sorry. So for those of you who don't know me on the call, my name is Claire Cronin, and I am the House Chair of the Judiciary Committee. But first and foremost, I am the representative from my hometown, Brockton, and the town of Easton as well. And through my work at the State House, for those of you who haven't met me before, I know I've met some of you, I was able to lead the House's efforts on criminal justice reform, which we passed in 2018. It's work that I'm very proud of that we did in the House of Representatives. it is work that I believe is going to have a meaningful impact for years and years to come. You know, we literally reformed our criminal justice system from the very earliest aspects of when someone might become involved in our criminal justice system, which would be perhaps as a juvenile, right up until the time when someone leaves our criminal justice system, whether it be that they re-enter society as, you know, informed and reputable members of our communities, or whether they leave our criminal justice system with even from compassionate medical release. But we did, oops, sorry, I'm working on a phone here, I apologize. But we did reform our criminal justice system, soup to nuts, all aspects from beginning to end. And I'm proud of the work we did. I'm proud of the work of all of my House members, and particularly the Black and Latino caucus. I am so happy to be an ally in some of these efforts. Most recently, we did work on the police reform bill, and I was able to lead the House's efforts on that. We're still in conference committee now, trying to resolve the differences between the House and Senate bill. As you can imagine, it is a very complex piece of legislation. We are still working very hard to get it over the finish line. We've been working as late as this morning. I've been on the phone with my fellow conference committee members. I know some of you are from Springfield. Representative Carlos Gonzalez, who is the chair of the Black and Latino caucus, has been just absolutely steadfast in his efforts, as well as the other reps, Rep Vargas, Rep Tyler, Rep Williams, who are on this call. So I can't really get into what is going on with those negotiations because the rules make our negotiations confidential until we reach a resolution. And I am very hopeful that that will be in the near future. And I'm happy to support these efforts and be an ally to all of you. So thanks for having me on.
I think we have a little technical difficulty. Click.
All right.
Are you still there? Look like your screen froze.
Oh, sorry. Can you hear me?
Yes, now I can hear you.
Yeah.
Okay. So I would love to ask that if anyone has questions for you, I know we can't talk about those negotiations, but about anything else, to please just type in the chat or in, since we have a few moments before our next speaker, we'll love to have you go back and forth and answer any other questions.
Sure.
Or if you want to talk about any other legislation that is currently being worked on or that's that's going to be proposed before this session's over, or anything you want to share about the budget itself, that your concerns.
Well, I will say my biggest concern, I mean, we have seen through COVID has shined a light on very wide disparities within our communities. That's the reality. I think I represent Brockton, which is a gateway city. Brockton is a city that has a strong, vibrant, diverse community. But we also share some of the challenges that our gateway cities fall into. We are disproportionately affected by poverty. 87% of the children in my Brockton school system live below the federal poverty level. We have high rates of asthma. I'm very happy that the previous speaker, and I think China spoke on some of the issues surrounding prostate cancer, particularly in our Black community. I've been involved for the last 6 years on a fabulous effort that was led by the Brockton NAACP, and it's around prostate cancer awareness. And we have combined with the Brockton NAACP with a group called Advocacy Corporation. Representative Jerry Cassidy in Brockton carries that budget amendment every year in the budget. And I can say through our efforts and our outreach to our minority communities, we have lowered the rate of prostate cancer in Brockton very significantly. We have been doing screenings, awareness, and we're seeing the impacts of what we have done in this. And AdmiTech is actually looking to expand their program into other gateway communities. And I would strongly suggest that you look into this, and because we do know early detection provides longevity in people's lives and saves lives. That's the reality. But as we move forward in this budget, I mean, my big concern, particularly in my district, is what I believe is going to cause COVID, I think is going to contribute to a widening of the achievement gap and the economic impact gap. You know, our budget coming forward this year, you know, the numbers are just not, we're not going to have the revenue we've always had. I worry about a surge in COVID, what that's going to look like. I worry that we haven't received support from the federal level yet. And these are all things, you know, every step of the way for our communities, we are going to be struggling to keep our kids in school, keep them learning. You know, I'm glad my children are grown right now, because I don't know that I would do a very good job homeschooling my kids. I don't think I have the patience. But whether it's healthcare, economic empowerment, education, all of these things are going to be, the gap is going to be widened as about of COVID. So we really must do everything we can to stay ahead of that. And that is my priority going forward for both my own district, but for the Commonwealth as a whole.
Thank you so much, Rep. Cronin. I just, before we have you go, haven't received any questions, but I know you are part of legislation for ending charges for prison calls, I believe.
Well, I think I'm going to have to give the credit on that to Representative China Tyler. And I think Chyla's still on the call.
So is she still?
Right. China?
I think she might have popped off for a second.
Maybe. Yes. China has been a staunch advocate for that. And I mean, clearly we should not be supporting some of our correctional facilities on the backs of our inmates and their families. And, you know, we saw that even during, you know, I have, unfortunately, there is the sheriff of Bristol County in particular has tried to restrict visitation by video conference and all that. And, you know, it's so important for people who are incarcerated to be able to connect with their support system at home. Because that allows for the most successful reentry. So any limits on communication with their family members and support groups is a really tough thing, and we're fighting against any limitation on that. But Representative Tyler has really done an amazing job on advancing the issue on the cost of phone calls for our incarcerated friends and family members.
Absolutely. Definitely, Rep. Tyler has been a very, very staunch advocate on behalf of those who've been able to do so far. Oh, you popped out. But Rep. Cronin, I want to say thank you so much for your time. If you want to just put your email in the chat so people can talk.
You know, I have to tell you, I can tell it to you. I am the most technologically challenged person. As you can see today, I'm trying to do the Zoom call on my phone.
Okay. We'll have somebody put in the chat for you then. But thank
Yeah.
you so much for your time and all you work you do on behalf of folks in the district.
mahouse.gov.
Gotcha. Thank you so much. We'll put it in the chat. And we appreciate your time, and we're going to move forward with the program. Thank you so much for stopping in. Feel free to stick around. If you have questions for Rep. Cronin, just please put it in the chat. We'll pull, I'm going to check the Facebook Live side as well and make sure we don't have no questions over there too. Okay, and now we're going to slide over to the next part of the program. We have some more folks that we're going to be speaking to. As soon as we fix this, gotcha. Okay, so next up, we do have a couple more folks. In the chat, we had a couple questions earlier about economic development. And so we do have the folks who do chair that committee. We have Senate Chair Eric Lesser, looking for you in the views. And then we also have Rep.
Eric.
Margaret Ferrante as well. I think they're in here somewhere. I'm sorry, there's a lot of people, so I'm looking through everyone's names now to pull them in. I think he might have popped out. We just had him in here. There he goes.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
All
Good
right.
day.
How are you?
Doing well. Glad you can join us. All right. So, Senator Eric Lesser is here with us. We're going to just welcome. Thank you for joining us today. And if you would like to speak about your committee, and then we'll field questions from the chat. Did you mute yourself again?
Can you hear me?
Yep, perfect.
All right, sorry about that. Yeah, I think I hit mute and then, but I think you control. I can mute myself, but you have to unmute me. So sorry about that. Can everybody hear me okay? Great. Well, hello everyone. Thanks for having me. I see some friends on the call. Hi, Bishop Swan, and I think Rep. Williams, my colleague from Springfield, is on, and I saw Councilor Malo Brown on the call as well. So I just want to introduce myself. My name is Eric Lesser, and I'm the Senate Chair of the Committee on Economic Development and Emerging Technologies. So it's a great honor to kind of speak to everyone today and give you a little bit of an update on what we're doing around economic development, and certainly would love to take questions and just have a little bit of a conversation. But frankly, I think, it has to be repeated, something that I think all of us know, which is that we are meeting really at a time of unprecedented crisis for our world, for our country, and for Massachusetts. And I think it's worth just reminding everyone and everyone we work with again and again and again that Massachusetts has nearly 10,000 people dead from coronavirus. Over 100,000 people have been infected. Many, many more have gotten very sick and likely will have chronic symptoms for a long time. We also have one of the highest unemployment rates in the country. And we have areas of our state and communities in our state that are suffering depression-era levels of unemployment as a result of both the underlying disparities that we all have known have always been there, and now the impact of a global pandemic layered on top of that. And I would say, everyone certainly has been hit and hurt by COVID-19, but no community has arguably been more impacted just on a disparate impact basis than the African American community. The data is very clear. Frankly, we pressured the Baker administration to release the data about the infection rates in Massachusetts to get a better picture on where the infections were happening, how they were spreading, and how we can do more to combat them. And it's very clear by almost any measure that the African American community in particular in our state has been one of the absolute hardest hit. And so our policy needs to be responsive to that and needs to be commensurate to that. And I'd add that on top of the emergency that we have faced with COVID-19 for the last 7+ months, we have also been reckoning with a historic historic reawakening around the issues of police violence and police brutality, which have always been there, but have been rekindled in their urgency and in their activism in the last few months. And certainly the communities I represent in Western Mass are absolutely included in that and part of that. And so I just wanted to quickly run everyone through what we have in our economic development bill that's specifically tied to these issues around equity and around inclusion, and why I think it's so urgent that we get this bill done soon, get it on the governor's desk so that we can begin to rebuild and recover and move forward. So one of the most important elements is urgent support in the form of grants, not loans, but grants to small businesses that we know have been devastated by COVID-19. And the language in the grant program is very deliberate about targeting the communities hardest hit by the virus, including our gateway cities, including minority and immigrant-owned businesses, and what we call micro businesses. So, businesses under $1 million in revenue, under $500,000 in revenue, community and neighborhood oriented, that we can get support to right away. We also include a new language around an affirmative marketing program so that the state as an employer and as a contractor is more deliberate about contracting with and buying services and purchasing products from minority-owned businesses. So we have that language included in the economic development bill as well. So we can go into a few more specifics. We worked with Rep. Tyler, for example, on a very important provision around hair braiding, opening up the hair braiding industry so that we could loosen some of the licensing requirements to allow more people to participate in that industry and to allow more wealth generation in that industry. We also have a very important program around the tourism sector, because we know that that's one of the sectors of the economy that has been the most impacted by COVID-19 and by the closures. We also know that the service sector in particular has been one of the areas of employment that has been the most disproportionately impacted. So there's quite a lot in the bill. We can kind of share more specifics with people. I see Rep. Vargas, who we worked with closely on that legislation, is also on the call. We can kind of get into more details if people want, but mainly wanted to introduce myself and really just talk about the work that we need to do to get more support out to our communities so that we can get to a place where the virus numbers can begin to come down and we can work on that more systemic improvement and those more systemic changes. But in order to do that, we've got to get help out to people now while people are struggling and while business is still very slow and while layoffs are still happening, to avoid those temporary disruptions from becoming more permanent.
Great. Thank you for that, Senator Lesser. We had a question in the chat that I think is very prevalent as you're talking about bills and stuff. So that's being introduced, but I want to ask in a way that is significant, but I think Brother Mackey posed a great question, so I'm gonna unmute him and ask him to ask his question aloud as well, which is very significant in this moment.
All right, so peace everybody. Yeah, so my question is, I hear that you're speaking about broad legislation, and it seems like a lot of what you're discussing is, a lot of work that you've been doing around your specific, community and so on and so forth. But my question is, this is a Black Men's Advocacy Day, So what are you doing to, what policy are you working on right now in legislation that's pushing, efforts that will benefit Black men? And lastly, we know that there, like, a lot of bills are in conference committee. So what are you doing on your end to push any legislation that pertains to Black men, whether it's beneficial for Black men? What are you doing to support Black men? Because I'm hearing broad, issues around, Black folks, and I'm a Black person, so I appreciate that. But I also want to know that, what are you doing for Black men? This is for every representative that is on this call. I would like for you all to be specific about what you're doing for Black men.
Yeah.
And what can you improve? And also, what can you improve? Because I know you all you probably already have your talking points around that, but I wanted to know, what else can you do to improve on what you're doing, what you can be doing for Black men and for Black folks?
Yeah, no, so I appreciate that question. And so first, I am here to listen too. That's why I wanted to try to cut my remarks short. I kept them a little bit broad so that we could get through them faster, because I am definitely eager for feedback. So if there's specific items or places or issues that you think we need to be focused on, I'm certainly all ears for that. I can run you through just specifically around Black men in particular. I've worked closely, and I think Rep. Williams is still on the call, with a group called Black Men of Greater Springfield to get more support into mentorship programs. We did a funding item last year to get them set up with a summer program that they've been running for a long time in order to help them get more money to continue that mentorship program. Unfortunately, COVID altered some of that programming, but more urgent than ever that we do that. I'd also say that in the communities I represent in Western Mass, we have a very significant issue with police violence. And unfortunately, we do know this is an issue that disproportionately impacts young Black men because they are often the ones targeted and often the ones victims of this violence. And I can tell you, for example, in Springfield, there was a very important Department of Justice report that came out just a few months ago, just over the summer, talking about how the Springfield Narcotics Bureau had engaged in a pattern and practice of abuse of force. And I actually read large portions of that report into the record during our Senate debate over the police reform legislation we worked on over the summer. That legislation is still in conference, so you're right. We've got to get that onto the governor's desk. I feel strongly that we need to get that done soon. We should have gotten it done a while ago, and that we need to get it done with reforms to qualified immunity included. Because I think historically what you've seen is that one of the ways some of the worst actors in terms of the most abusive police officers get out of accountability is through the shield of qualified immunity. So our measure, which I worked on, includes a reform to qualified immunity that would pierce that shield, so to speak. It would still provide protections for a large number of police officers, but it would do more than really any other state in getting over that hump of qualified immunity defense, and we really want and need that to move forward. In our economic development bill, specifically, we have programs targeted again at the businesses and organizations that have been the most impacted by the closures. So those are not targeted at Black men specifically, but I do think if implemented correctly, will do a lot to improve outcomes for the Black male community, because again, it would be targeted at those businesses on a community level that have been the most impacted by the closures, and would be working towards getting help and support to them. I'd also add the affirmative marketing programs, which is the contracting issues that we're trying to get changed on a state level, would do a lot, for example, to encourage more minorities in the trades, and also minority tradesmen who right now often get shut out of a lot of public construction projects, whether it's schools, roads, other state projects. This legal change would do a lot to help there. But I'm certainly open to more suggestions, and certainly always open to more feedback.
Thank you for that, Senator. If there are other questions, please post them in the chat as we go along. I want to say thank you for your time and your work, and I hope that for you and everybody else listening at this time, to also be mindful that in this time we're not just looking for the same old, and we want to push to as we're challenging you, we want you to also hold us to speak to what issues are important to us. So if you do want to have a back and forth, if you do want to speak to how we can work in partnership to push some of the legislation you got going forward, or if you're not sure of what's important to us, ask us so we can definitely dig in a little bit and let you know what's happening. I think a real powerful piece that we don't get as much virtually that we got last time was that we were able to sit down as each rep from each committee, and we were able to really talk about what the issues we're facing, and then we can work towards helping you turn that into legislation that will benefit particularly our community, especially Black men, and the oppression and the injustices that we face, because often or not, it's always visualized when we're on the short end of the stick of things. And we've seen that countless times over and over via mass media, where we always see the end result is at the peril of Black people, especially Black men, subjected to all kinds of injustice, especially from a physical standpoint, which traumatizes us and our communities.
No, absolutely. Well, thank you, for the invitation, and I'll just share my contact info. I see a couple of people in the chat asking for it. It's all online, but it's eric.lesser@masenate.gov. Again, eric.lesser@masenate.gov. So feel free to email me or reach out. Certainly feel the urgency of the time. There's no doubt about it. And unfortunately, sometimes on Beacon Hill, the posture can be to too quickly revert back to a kind of business as usual mentality. So I think you're right, Matt, to point that out. And I think we've always got to fight that and continue to fight for urgency. And we have some major items. If we can get them done, if we can get them on the governor's desk, they really would be historic changes. Again, the police reform legislation that the state is working on, if we can get this done, if we can get this on the governor's desk, is really going to be historic. And I would just point out, I meant to say it in my intro remarks, but the absolute abject failure of the federal government to respond adequately to the multiple crises we face has really put the action and put the onus and put the pressure on states. And so I do think as awful and as dysfunctional as the federal response has been, it creates an opportunity for us in Massachusetts to be the example of something better. But it's up to all of us to really fight for that. So I hear that urgency, and certainly want to work in common purpose towards those goals.
Okay, we have one more question / comment in the chat for you, and then we're going to move on to our next speaking piece. And the last one is from Greg Ellaby. So Greg, where are you at? Let me find you real quick so I can pull you in. Is Greg still in? Oh gosh, I can't find him. There you go. Greg, we can't, there you go. Go ahead, ask your question, comment, brother.
Morning to all you guys, and thank you all for showing up. My name is Greg Ellaby. I'm from Springfield, Massachusetts. Hello, Rep. Bud, Marlo, and Mr. Lesser. How's everybody going? My question is to everybody here. Are we looking to raise funds for a specific goal with this meeting, or are we just going to discuss problems that we know are already existing? And we need to find solutions. I am here on behalf of the Western Mass Black Chamber of Commerce, where we're looking to provide assistance for young African-American men to get back in the workforce and produce jobs and training and financial literacy. So my question is, how do we put that all in a ball and receive funding for that? I know I'm gonna receive a few emails about my lovely tone, but my question to you, Mr. Lesser, since you are the head of the ECHO Dev, is when can you and I sit down with a few other local reps and talk about ways to actually get the funding. I mean, you guys are doing a great job in Boston, but some of that takes a lot of time to go through the different phases that it needs to pass. And I can't tell my kids, or some guy outside can't tell his kids, well, we got to wait to the next session so I can buy some groceries. My question is, what are we doing now today, October 14th?
No.
And what can we do?
Yeah, so you're absolutely right. So if we've got, Mr. Elway, if you have kind of specific items for Springfield or for Western Mass, we should probably talk offline, because there are a lot of options in terms of the state budget advocacy we could do. So, why don't we just circle back after this, so we can set up a call, we can meet in person, which is easy enough. And I think Rep. Williams is on the call, so maybe the three of us can sit down, or if you have a kind of specific program or a specific idea for Springfield or for Western Mass. What I would just say kind of broadly on your kind of broader point is, it was actually just announced this morning that the governor is putting out a new budget for FY21. We were deliberately, I think, in a little bit of a holding pattern, frankly, for the last several months, because we were waiting on the federal government for additional aid. Now that it increasingly looks like we're not getting more federal aid, at least in the short term, from the federal government, that might change with the elections, but that's a subject for a different call. I think we will have a little bit more freedom now to put our own state budget together and prioritize specific programs. The economic development bill that we worked on, again, not to kind of continue back to that, but I'm most familiar with that because that's where my work has really been focused, would include hundreds of millions of dollars in new investments for community-oriented businesses, community-oriented nonprofits. So we do need to get that done. It's in the final stages. Hopefully very soon we will get that done and the governor will sign it, and then we can begin to get that money out the door. But it's not enough. It's not fast enough, and we do need more partnership and better partnership from the federal government. There's no doubt about it.
All right, I will surely send you my cell phone number and my email address so we can conduct some business outside of this conversation. And thank you for your response.
Of course, looking forward to it.
Yes, sir. You're welcome.
Great.
And another thing, no, I'm just kidding.
Good question. Thank you for following up with that, Greg. Appreciate you, brother. Senator Lesser, thank you for having sitting on the chat on the Zoom with us, and feel free to continue in the chat. And if you get a moment, type your email address again. I know you read it out loud, but just type it again in the chat. Oh, there it is. See, you quick.
Yep, I just put it in. Yeah.
Yep.
Hi, Rep. Miranda.
So I want to
thank you.
We're going to move forward. You're welcome. We're going to move forward in the program. I just want to say, want to acknowledge a few folks. Want to say hello to Maya, repping Senator Diaz's office. Want to say hello to my sister, Rep. Liz Miranda, and also to school committee member from Cambridge, Miss Aisha Wilson. Hello, hello, hello. Thank you for being on the call. Again, welcome everyone to Black Men's Advocacy Day. And very quickly, while I have a chance to, I would like to get some remarks out. Ask Ms. Rep. Miranda when she's ready. I will unmute her just to give a few words. Oh, here you go. We're going to unmute you right now. Sister Rep. Miranda, are you ready? You good?
Yeah. Good morning, brothers. Well, actually, it's good afternoon. I wanted to first say how beautiful this is. Last year, I've been a rep for 18 months, but I've been a resident, I like to say a resident of Roxbury and my Black woman for my entire life. And it was amazing to walk into that room in the State House and see brothers from across the Commonwealth. And I know we're in a different time, and so we're online, and so sometimes online disconnects our connectivity, but I just want to remind you all that I'm here. I'm supportive of multiple causes, and I'm going to spend a few minutes talking about them, but just want to say how beautiful and necessary and important these type of calls and meetings are, not only for talking about legislation and holding us accountable, but also for community building across cities and towns and across the diaspora. So I just want to give you guys a shout out and the 2 snaps for that. So, since I've been in the State House, I have worked diligently on many important issues. Some of those issues have been around criminal justice reform, immigrant rights, maternal justice, mental health, environmental justice, and looking at how these issues are disproportionately impacting communities. So most of you know me. If you don't, I represent the 5th Suffolk District, which includes parts of Roxbury and Dorchester. It is the most of color district in the entire state of Massachusetts. Sorry, someone walked in my home. Sorry. I'm still living in the hood, and so sometimes people knock on my door. Working on these issues really came out of my lived experience. I grew up on Dudley Street. I grew up in an environmentally unjust community that had 1,400 parcels of vacant land and illegal trash transfer stations. We have 5 times higher the asthma rate. We died 30 years before our white brothers and sisters down the street. And I grew up at a single parent home, one of 11 children. My father, my brother were both incarcerated and deported. And I am the only elected official that currently has a sibling incarcerated in the DOC system, and the only elected that has had a brother be murdered on the streets of Boston. And so I bring this survivorship that many of our community members are trying to live through and thrive through to the State House. And I think that's an important voice. I'm only one of 3 Black women, but I'm super excited that Brandy Fluker Oakley will be joining us to make 4 Black women in the entire Massachusetts legislature. It's not nearly enough representation of Black and brown people, but we are working diligently. And some of the issues that I think would be very important to the brothers on this call is that, because I've lived with incarceration my entire life, I care a lot about the criminal justice system. I sit on the judiciary. I'm the only non-attorney on the Judiciary Committee. I also sit on public safety, veteran affairs, and small business and community development. I've been happy that I've actually got 2 wins this year as a freshman, which really doesn't happen. And one is around an issue that around maternal justice. And people may think that it's just a Black women's issue, but it's not, because as you know, the sisters and queens of our families are working for the betterment of all of us, and in our communities holding it down with brothers. And so with Black women dying 2 to 4 times the rate of white women across the country before, during, and after childbirth, we know that brothers are suffering too. They're losing their children, and they are not sure how to address the racism in our healthcare and dealing with the postpartum issues that are felt by families, not just by the women, their birthing families that are going through a lot. And so what's important is I got a commission on maternal inequities. And it's important because even though Massachusetts is a state of great healthcare and biosciences, Black women are dying 2 times the rate of white women even here. And we have some of the best healthcare in the world. And that commission is going to be Black-led and Black-centered. And that's an important piece, because you can build all the commissions you want, but if they're not being led by the people most impacted, then the work is not really done. The second thing is around getting an additional $5 million in the budget for small and minority businesses. I really hate the word minority, so I'm going to say Black and brown businesses in the Commonwealth. We all know we're going through 3 pandemics at once. We're going through this COVID pandemic, which is a public health crisis. We're going through an environmental and economic justice fight, as many of the jobs that our communities depend on have just evaporated. And so we see that there's some people that are not going to be returning to work because there's no work for them. And our communities have been suffering for a long time and continue to re-suffer We're going through this national racial reckoning happening. And then soon, when the moratorium ends, our communities are bracing for probably the biggest housing fight of our lifetimes. We already are gentrified in our communities. We already don't have enough home ownership opportunities. The rent is too damn high. I know in Boston, you know, people call me all the time, you know, paying $2,000 to $2,400 for 3 bedrooms when you're making $24,000 to $30,000 a year. You just can't survive. And our families are at the brink of not only one check at a time, but I would actually argue that it's one shift at a time. You know, people are really struggling to make ends meet and feed their families. And lastly, I have been doing a lot of work around parole reform, looking at reentry. Parole reform is because the parole board needs to change. Right now, it's full of prosecutors. And we believe, me and Rep. Vargas out of Haverhill have been working diligently on trying to reform parole, because there's a lot of brothers and sisters sitting in our system that were meant to be paroled, are waiting 5 years between parole hearings. And we know that that is a lifetime to our families. And so we want to make sure that there are more people with mental health and social work experience on the parole board, that it's expanded to include more diverse voices. I believe currently there's 1 person of color. If not, there might be 2, but we all know that not all skin folk is kinfolk. And so we're trying, I know that's one of Horace's favorite lines, thinking about how we actually focus on the criminal justice system and the DOC. We make up 67 to 70% of the people in our DOC system, but make only 20% of the population of Massachusetts. Later today, I'll be going to a Harvard legislative briefing on the report that they did. And we already know that the criminal justice system is racist, and we know that it's filled with Black and brown bodies. But I think it's important for Massachusetts to pay close attention to this, because we love our liberalism. We love to recognize ourselves as a blue state that votes majority Democratic. But when it comes to criminal justice reform, we are not that progressive. And lastly, I just filed earlier this year. Most people know that I filed the Act to Save Black Lives, which was the most forward-thinking and progressive reform bill around police accountability, which was meant to sort of end many of the practices in Massachusetts that are happening around the country around police homicide, police violence, and police brutality. Right now, the House is in
Oh, I was about to ask, Reverend Miranda, what is the bill? What is that?
5128, I believe, is the number, but it was the first bill. As if you notice how the trajectory went, I just want to explain a little bit of how George Floyd gets killed, Ahmaud Arbery, and Breonna Taylor. And most people were thinking, well, what do we do? But for our communities, we know that they were just 3 out of the over 1,000 people that die every year due to police homicide. And particularly with no-knock warrants, in the case of Breonna Taylor, there are over 110 that happen a year. And many of them are elders, children, and Black women, because many times folks are breaking into homes that are the wrong homes, or they might be filled with family members when they're trying to get one person with this failed war on drugs sort of apparatus. So the governor came out with a bill on post, which was really filed by Representatives Vieira and Holmes. They've been working on that bill for over 6 to 10 years, which creates a system to license officers in Massachusetts and decertify them if they do something wrong. We are one of only 4 states that don't have a system like that. So the governor came out with a bill, then the Senate president came out with a bill with the Senate, and then the House came out with a bill. And in between all of that, I had the Act to Save Black Lives to really push us to be more progressive, and it's currently in conference committee. And last is the truth.
Miranda, I'm sorry to hold you up, but we do have to keep going.
I got you. I just, I know brothers need answers, and I just want to be clear that I've been trying to sort of lead with the racial justice and equity lens.
And I super appreciate all that. Can we follow up and continue with you? Can you or your staff put your email in the chat so we can follow up with you. And if you need some energy behind some of those bills you put forward, please let us know that as well. I'm sorry, I want
No, it's okay. Thank you. Have a good day, brothers.
I super appreciate all that you're doing and repping Roxbury. Thank you for being my rep as well. You know what I'm saying? So we really appreciate and adore the fact that you're leading from that angle and sharing not just your personal testimony, but using that to infuse the work that you're doing. So thank you for that. So folks, we're going to keep moving forward. We are behind schedule slightly, but I do want to acknowledge that right now we're going to pull forward our next committees. And I want y'all to feel free, ask the questions, write them in the chat, and we're going to pull you right in. Right now, we're going to pull in House Chair Alice Price and Senator Lewis, who are on the Education Joint Committee. And we want to talk about education. We want to inform those questions and talk about that as well. So let me pull them right in. There you are, and there you are.
Hi, everybody. Alice, do you want to go first? I think, oh, we're having a little difficulty hearing you, Rep. Peisch.
We unmuted Rep. Peisch. I don't know what happened.
Alice, it looks like you're muted now. Maybe try unmuting again.
There we go.
Yeah, we're all learning how to navigate
Yeah.
new technology, right?
No matter what happens, this always happens on a Zoom call. I swear there should be just another conferencing platform that doesn't have so many buttons.
Can you hear me now?
Perfect. There you go.
Okay. Sorry about that. So I'm not entirely clear on what the format of the meeting is. So
we just
if you would
that,
just give me some direction, I'd be happy to respond.
So we're asking everyone every elected official to introduce themselves, talk about their committee, and talk about anything that they're doing in their committee or any legislation being pushed that will affect or help Black men specifically, Black communities in general.
Thank you. So as you indicated, my name is Alice Peisch. I am the House Chair of the Joint Committee on Education, and I've been a member of the legislature since 2003. My district is exclusively suburbs west of Boston. But as the chair of the Education Committee, I would say that the #1 policy goal of the legislature with respect to education for the past, 10 to 15 years, if not longer, has been to try to close the gap in equity in education. I think that we recognize that while Massachusetts has a very strong public education system, that it is not every child in the system has access to the same quality of education. And it has been our goal to change that. Working with Senator Lewis over in the beginning of this session, we were successful in getting enacted last fall some legislation that's known as the Student Opportunity Act. And the main focus of that act is, from my perspective, twofold. One, to ensure that every district has adequate funding to offer a high quality education to all of the students. And that does not mean that every district gets the same amount of money. We recognize that in communities that have high percentages of students from families with low incomes and English language learners, that more resources are needed to support those students. So the focus of the bill was to provide sufficient funding. And then the second, and I think equally important part, is to make sure that when funding is directed to school districts, that it actually benefits the students. I think unfortunately we have too many situations where we see what appears to be a reasonable amount of funding on an average basis, but when you go into some of the buildings and you talk to the students and the parents, you realize that certain schools are getting funding and sufficient funding, maybe more than sufficient, and others are not. So it is our hope that we've put sufficient controls with the Department of Education so that the additional funding that the bill provides will in fact get to the students who need it the most. The challenge that we're currently facing with that legislation is the first year of implementation we are currently in, and as I'm sure you know, because of the COVID-19, the revenues to the state have dropped dramatically. So without, I caught the tail end of Senator Lesser's comments and his referencing the need for federal dollars. If we do not get a big infusion of additional federal dollars for states and municipalities, we are going to be hard pressed to fully fund this new education money in this fiscal year. Although I would say on both the House and Senate side, we have made it one of our top priorities. The problem that I see with that is without federal funding, even if we were to fund education at a very high level, the only way you do that is, unfortunately, is by taking money from other areas if we don't get an increase in the federal money. And a lot of the state money serves the same populations with respect to health and human services. So I'm very concerned about how we are going to end up moving forward. Right at the moment, our revenues are down, but not down as much as I think we had thought they might be this year. So I'm cautiously optimistic that when we finalize the budget for this year, that we will be able to devote significant funding to those communities that need it the most. My worry now is about next year, because I think this unemployment and a variety of negative consequences of the virus may not fully materialize for the next few months. And I've heard references earlier to, the housing crisis and what's happening there. So I just think as this goes on and the additional monies that people were getting who became unemployed stop or have stopped, we're going to see a more significant impact on our dollars. So that's the primary area that I would say the committee has focused on, and I have focused on, that it addresses your concerns. The one other thing I would mention is I am looking at some legislation filed by a Representative Tyler that deals with curriculum and ensuring that the curriculum across the board in Massachusetts is reflective accurately of the experiences of all the historical experiences of all people in the Commonwealth. And we haven't, Massachusetts, like most states, is a local control in terms of what's taught. That gets decided by local school committees. But if the local school committees are not living up to what I think they should be with respect to having a curriculum that represents all of the diverse backgrounds of the students that are in the schools, then the state is going to need to step in. So I will leave it there for the moment and have Senator Lewis probably wants to make a few comments from his perspective, and I'm happy to take any questions that anyone has.
Senator Lewis, before you go, we do have a question, and I'm just looking for the individual who can pull it up and ask. It is, where is Savedra at? There, that person wants to ask a question. So please, after you ask a question, Rep. Price, if you want to give a response, and Senator Lewis as well, so if you want to give a response to that, you're unmuted. Go ahead, Sandra.
Hi, everyone. My name is Sandra Saavedra. I currently work for Counselor Julia Mejia. I'm actually a former educator, taught math education in Springfield, Massachusetts, as well as was a teacher in Boston and an administrator in Boston, Massachusetts. So this is me just on a personal level asking, advocating for my former Black and Brown students. I always wonder what measures, such as Jeffrey also chimed in, what measures are used to indicate that Massachusetts has a strong education community? Because how is it in my eyes, and this is just my opinion, wouldn't it mean that we would actually have funds and actual giving resources to students who need them most in order to actually be indicative that we have a strong learning community rather than a more certain isolated strong communities within, whether that's BPS or whether that's different school districts within Massachusetts? Thank you.
So you have asked a very complicated question, and one that's not easily answered, but I'll just try to take a stab at it. I would say that in general, Massachusetts is viewed as having a strong education system because on all of the measures that all states participate in, there's something called the National Assessment of Educational Progress, which is a test that's given by the federal government every other year. I'm oversimplifying, but basically every other year to 4th and 8th graders. And Massachusetts over the past probably 15 to 20 years has scored the highest in all subgroups, meaning that as a whole we score high, and also all of the groups that when you look at the measures of how they're doing, this is in English and math basically. For example, our low-income students perform better than low-income students in any other part of the country. From my perspective, that's not good enough because we still have a big gap between the performance of our low-income students in Massachusetts and the students who come from a higher income. So there's no question there is a problem in Massachusetts with respect to that. The other issue with respect to, I think you were getting at the differences between the districts and where decisions are made, and there's a constant tension between the local control that school committees have and the state control. And it's very challenging because most parents would like to have a strong voice in how their schools are run. And that is supportive of local control. But there are certainly circumstances when it does not appear that the school committees maybe are being as responsive to the needs of the people they serve. And in that instance, you do see the state coming in. There's a big debate about how much control should the state exercise. And that actually, I would say, Jason is free to comment on this, but I would say that was the biggest challenge that we had in the legislation with respect. Everyone wanted all the money. No one was arguing that we should not give every district lots of money. But when we then tried to figure out, well, how do we ensure that money gets spent to serve the students well, there was a lot of pushback and the districts all wanting to make those decisions themselves. So we have some measures that are designed to make sure they're all good. I'm going on too long, sorry.
Right there, and ask Senator Lewis if he wants to give some comment to the question posed by Mr. Vedra, and then we'll move forward from there.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks, Matthew. Thanks you, Sandra. Good to see Horace as well, and others on the Zoom. And I'm so sorry we can't sit down in person this year, but still glad to have the chance to hear your feedback for us and your in the issues that are most important to you. I do think that as Rep. Paish talked about, the passage of the Student Opportunity Act late last year was a major civil rights victory, for our schools and our students in Massachusetts. There've been work for many years before that to achieve those reforms. And, it does give Massachusetts now the most progressive school funding formula in the country. And by that, I mean that we will be directing funding, state funding, largely to districts that have higher numbers of low-income families, larger numbers of English learners, students with special needs. And that will have I'm very hopeful that will have a significant impact, particularly in communities of color, in terms of providing resources and opportunity that has for too long been shortchanged, in those communities relative to more affluent, suburban, largely white communities. So it is major reforms for our public schools. The work is not done. We now need to implement that legislation, and we need all of you to hold us accountable. We need the legislature today and in future years and the governor to continue to implement that legislation and make sure that all of those changes to the way we fund public schools are fully adopted through state budgets. So you all have an important role to play there. We also, another piece of legislation I wanted to mention that I'm very pleased about having gotten across the finish line is known as Breakfast After the Bell. And that is all about trying to address food insecurity amongst tragically too many of our students. And of course, we know that's gotten even worse during the pandemic. But that's an important strategy, Breakfast After the Bell, to make sure that all students, particularly low-income students, have access to the nutrition they need both in the morning, and at lunchtime while they're in school. So that's important as well. I wanted to echo what Rep. Pye said about curriculum. I do think we've got work to do there, and I'm working. Just the last point I wanted to make, Matthew. I'm working actively with a group in out of the city of Malden in my district that has pulled together a great coalition of activists that is working to look at ways that we can make changes to the curriculum and also the diversity that we need within our schools. We don't have enough teachers of color. We don't have enough principals and administrators of color. And we know there's a lot of research that shows, if a student of color has at least one teacher of color, that can improve his or her life outcomes. So there's a lot of work we need to do there around diversity in our staff in our schools and also in our curriculum in our schools. So that's something we're going to be committed to as we continue to get through this pandemic and after.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much.
Is there anything in legislation about school or administrative retention for Black men in particular? Either of you can answer. We want to make sure the focal point stays on Black men and boys, or is there anything talking about reducing the negative outcomes or the disciplinary actions, since there is data and research that shows that Black boys are oftentimes disciplined at a higher rate than other students in general?
I can speak to that a little bit. We're very aware of that issue, and we did pass some legislation a few years ago that was designed to reduce the amount of suspensions and expulsions by establishing, making it clear that one could not be automatically suspended or expelled for what most of us would consider to be relatively minor infractions. And part of that legislation was also monitoring how that's going. And we're just in the process now of getting back a couple of years of data on that. So we will be looking at how that is working. But I think it is critically important. Some of the anecdotal evidence we have on that is really quite concerning. And so I think I see that, frankly, as part of this new legislation that we passed last year, because not only does it provide funding, but it requires all districts to submit plans to the Department of Education on how they're going to spend the funding, and also a lot of more data on specific schools and progress that's being made there. And I think that will allow us to identify where these disciplinary actions are inconsistent with supporting the needs of the students, and hopefully diminish the amount of that, eliminate, frankly, all that from happening. It's challenging, as you know, because there's a lot of this goes on behind closed doors, and it's hard to really get at it. I'd like to kind of related to this, I would like to add on to what Senator Lewis said a moment ago about what you all can do. I think with respect to advocating at your local districts. So I think this bill gives the tools to
Where's the
improve
bill
things.
number? I'm sorry, do you have the bill number?
Oh, the bill's passed, so you don't need to
Okay.
advocate for the bill. I'm
Okay.
talking about now that it's being implemented,
No,
what
no.
we really
I'm
need is
sorry.
people.
You're right, because you did said now you have a few years of data.
Right.
So I see Corey put in to ask more questions. Is there a way specifically we can get a hold of that data through your office?
Sure. If Corey can put in my email address and you can ask us where you'd like us to send it, we can give you links to all that information.
Okay, thank you. And Corey definitely did put that info in there, so thank you for that. And I do want to be respectful of time. If there are any other questions for either Senator Lewis or Rep. Peisch, please feel free to continue, put them in the chat, and we'll definitely ping you in to ask out loud when time allows, or for anyone else to move the agenda forward. Thank you both for being present, and people, please feel free to do it in the chat, ask questions, or grab the emails to follow up as well. I do want to say hello to our next group of folks who are on. I want to recognize Senate Chair Eldridge. Want to also give shout out to our Housing Joint Committee Chair, which is Rep. Honan, and then representing Senator Creighton's office, Anish is present. So what we're going to do, since we have to split up some time, is we're going to create a breakout room so folks who want to speak, hear from and speak directly with folks. We're going to do breakout rooms. So we're going to create a breakout room right now for housing. And so with House Chair Honan and Senate Chair Creighton office, we're going to create a room very quickly. So folks who are interested in that, just please do me a favor and go to participants. And not participants. Go to reactions and just put a thumbs up on the screen so we can grab you, or if you want to just say in the chat that you're interested in that, and we'll move you over to that room while we're going to continue conversating here. And we have Judiciary Chair James Elridge, who's going to give some words, and we're going to continue conversation here as well. So we're going to have a little split off, and we're going to come back together after that conversation takes place. So if you just want to say in the chat, like you want to talk about housing or hear from the housing chair and speak to those issues, because I know we started a poll a little while ago, and of the poll, housing was huge. There was over 14 people who said housing was super important to them. The biggest issue that people responded to saying that was the issue for them was wealth, income inequality, but housing was actually second right after that. So that's a very big deal that we want to make sure it gets addressed. So Uzochi, my partner in crime, who's been working on the background, is creating a chat room right now. Uzochi?
Yeah, 1 second. Working on it right now. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. So while that is happening, I want to say hello to, where is he at? Oh, well, yeah, you've been waiting for a while. So while we're waiting for Uzochi to create that, I'm going to have Horace give some remarks and also talk about why it's important for us to do the pledge that we're working on as well.
Good afternoon, family. I hope everybody's well. Thank you for being a part of this. Matt, staff, thanks for the job that you did putting this together. All of our reps, all of our friends, thank you for being a part of this. It's real simple. I'm going to be very brief. 25 years ago on October 16th, 2 million men went to Washington, D.C. with the express idea to profoundly make change in our communities, both economically, socially, spiritually, and physically. And 25 years later, on March 13th, at the start of the pandemic, the lie that is America, was exposed to the world. The income, the social, the educational, the health disparities all became alive and real. And a major dilemma for us as leaders is that there is no way that we can go back and call ourselves leaders if we choose to willingly go back to the way things were. We can't go back to the way things were. That's why Bud Williams introduced House Bill 5199. That's why Nick Collins introduced the Senate version of it, because to give Black and brown people an opportunity to have some level of self-determination and build their communities. More than that is that this budget, as Rep. Pike said, coming up in January, is going to be scary. And it's going to require all of us, okay, Black men working together from all across the state, casting aside caste stuff, casting aside our egos, casting aside all the things that have separated and divided us. Because I'm gonna be candid with you, in the Massachusetts General Court, they don't take us very seriously because they think that we're easily distracted, one, and two, that we don't have a level of solidarity. We need to have a level of solidarity now, the likes of which we've never seen before. It is up to us as Black men, as advocates of our community, as leaders of our community, to lead this effort and empower our legislative Black and Latino caucus and work with them and come up with policies and actions and funding ideas that are going to make sure that our community not only survives, but thrives. But more than that too, we have to make sure that, as Rep. Pye says, is that the budget cannot be balanced on the backs of those who can least afford it. And for that to happen, we have got to fight, we have got to unite. So with that being said, we're hoping that you will join us on November 5th to follow up with this. That's 2 days after the election, because after the election, you should be so goddamn mad by what the Proud Boys and all these other folks are trying to do. Let me tell you, nationally, I head up Black Ballot Power, and we've been working around the country to make sure Black people vote. And I can tell you stories from California, to Maine that will knock your socks off. There's no doubt in my mind. If you look at the Washington Post today, there's a front page story about the strategies that the conservative movement have been using to try and do voter suppression. It is real. They're knocking down 94-year-old senior citizens in High Point, North Carolina in wheelchairs. They're going to Richmond, Virginia and shooting up polling places. This is no joke. On election day, one of the great things that we can do as leaders is to be out there as Black men, making sure, not violently, but morally, standing out there, talking to our people who are voting, because on the average are 2-3 hour lines, engaging our citizens, engaging our neighbors, building our leadership cred, and being the eyes and ears of everything that's taking place at that polling place, because you could bet your ass those morons from New Hampshire and Maine will be making their way to cities like Brockton, Springfield, and Roxbury to do what they do. And ain't no GD way that we're gonna put up with that. So on November 5th, knowing that we got to come back and deal with the budget come January 1, we have to help our friends, Alice Pike, Eric Les. We have to help them. They have to advocate for us. Moreover, the Black Caucus has really got to advocate for us. We have to ask them to do something that they're not used to doing, which is fighting like hell for us, because we have to be their base. So on November 5th, we have to we're hoping that you could come back and join us again and sit down and think about how we can work together, because New Bedford, Brockton, Springfield, Fall River, Worcester, you're all on this, Pittsfield, you're all on this call today. And if we could just leave our egos at the front door, come humble and prepared to do the work of leaders. Not people who are leaders are servants. Leaders are not people who like to see their names in the newspapers. So coming humbly, working together, and working with our friends in the legislature and working with our academic friends to help us think things through. Let us be the force for decency, justice, and progress that our community needs. I personally thank you for this. I'm excited that BET has done this. A lot of people may not know, but I'll tell you now. As of January 1, I will no longer be the executive director of the Union Minority Neighborhoods. Matt Parker will be the executive director of the Union Minority Neighborhoods. And we hope and we fully intend to continue to be what we like to think is a force for good and progress, for decency and democracy in our state and in our city. So if you could join us November 5th, we look forward to having you because we have much work to do and everybody has to play. And if everybody does a little, nobody has to do a lot. Thank you, brothers. Peace and love.
Thank you for that, Horace. And we're going to continue the conversation. And also just want to encourage people to always keep the conversation going in the chat, as well as November 5th when we all get back together again, because there's always going to be much work to be done. We're at 12:50 and I do want to move forward. Housing, which has, whoa, okay. Maybe that wasn't done right. Did you place everyone where they're supposed to be?
I put them in housing, yeah.
Okay.
Is that okay?
We're still live, Horace.
Oh, hi. No. No, I got it.
Horace walks out the office and wants to say hello to folks again.
Hey.
But hey, that's Horace for you. So matter of fact, what we're going to do is we're going to take a 2-minute break. We're going to assign the rooms properly if they were done right. And we're going to be right back in like 30 seconds.
Was, like.
Okay, that's it.
Probably with it now. No. Okay. See you, son.
All right, folks, we are back from break. I thought mute music would be appropriate, but maybe not. Shout out to everybody who's still with us. Shout out to people who are just joining us. Thank you for being here, Dana. Peace to my brother from the Male Engagement Network, Darrell, who's in the building. Peace to everybody else who's still with us. Thank you so much for being present. Bud didn't quit on a shed. But you got that thing so close, bro.
I just thank you and thank Gary for participating. I have to give a shout out to one of my young proteges, Rich Johnson from the Chest Angels, who are doing amazing work down here in Springfield. At some point in time, Matt, I want to connect you up with him. I told him last night I want you to have a one-on-one with him. He's doing a lot of good work within the community. So that's all I wanted to say. And thank folks for hanging in there. And to Chairman Conan, good to see you, my friend. And I say Gary Porter, my friend is there too, also with Reverend Dave Lewis, who's doing amazing work with the mental health community. And we're going to be working with them. So thank you.
Great, great, great. So what time is it? It's just about 1 o'clock. We are behind a little bit, but I definitely want to give the platform to real quick, just shout out Councilor Bach from District 8 of Boston City Council, who is online with us for a second, and just thank you for being present. And we're going to move forward with the agenda. And right now I am looking for—
Brother Matt, just
Yeah.
real quick, Brother Ellaby's on there. He's doing amazing work with the Black Chamber down here in Springfield.
The Springfield Chamber of Commerce, Black Chamber of Commerce, I'm sorry. Shout out.
He was on the line with
as well.
a couple questions, but I want to acknowledge him too. So thank you. And
Definitely,
Brother Rich Mills from the epilepsy. We have a young brother doing amazing work with the epilepsy community, African American, who started that up. So a lot of good stuff going on down here. Thank you.
Absolutely. And it would be remiss for me not saying, I know the reps and the sisters who spoke earlier, but I want to just shout out the sisters who are present with us, who are supporting Black men through and through. And I think we can take a page out of that book. I know we do that on many levels, but we also, as Black men, should be comfortable with stepping forward and supporting our sisters in their endeavors and their leadership as well. Sometimes the best way to lead is to follow, and the male is the head, but the backbone is always, always the Black woman. So let's be mindful and remember that, and shout out and praise our Black women for all that they do in supporting us. Now coming in at, you got a moment. Did Senate, is Michael Moore on yet? Looking for him, because he's our 1 o'clock person. And also just, brothers, oh, here he goes. So get him on and situated. But I also want to be mindful to say that we got to continue this work and continue conversating with each other. I hope y'all feel free to take the time to, I know some of y'all might be on the phone. So if you press on your phone screen, to chat, feel free to shout out where you're coming from and what you're doing as well. Because it's really important to have those kind of conversations and those discussions amongst ourselves, because we have a lot to offer, and we don't even as much time. We've been on here for almost 2 hours, and I don't know each brother personally, but I do know that when we do unite, when we do speak to what we're doing and what we're capable of collectively, I know earlier Brother James definitely said in the chat, reach out to him. But I definitely want to say it's not just enough to say, hey, hit me up, but also this is why, or this is what I'm working on. So please use the chat. I know, sometimes I type slow. Many of us may or may not, but be mindful to speak to like what we can offer each other and how we can work together. And it's all good. Let's see what's in the chat right now. Got a lot of chat going on. Shout out to Brother Kenny Mack. Housing's going on right now in a breakout room. And with that said, now it is 1 o'clock. So I do want to say from public safety, we got the Senate Chair for Public Safety, Michael Moore, present. So I'm gonna unmute you right now. Michael, hello, how are you doing?
Good, how are you?
I'm doing wonderful. So welcome to Black Men's Advocacy Day. We would like for you just to introduce yourself, area you cover, and tell us a little bit about your committee, and also what is your committee doing in regards to addressing concerns or dealing with Black men.
All right, I am the co-chair of the Committee on Public Safety and Homeland Security. I also chair the Committee on Bonding, State Assets, Capital Expenditures, and State Bonding. I've been on the committee roughly 10 years. I've been chair for the last about 4 years. I cover the 2nd Worcester District, which is the community of half the community of Worcester. And then I have the towns of Leicester, Auburn, Millbury, Grafton, Shrewsbury, Upton, and Northbridge.
So you got a lot of Central Mass.
Yes. Yep. Yeah. And again, I share the city of Worcester with the Senator Chandler. As far as the committee goes, I don't know if we really have anything that is directly related to Black men, specifically for legislation that we've had come through the committee. Unless I'm missing something and someone has a bill that you can reference. I don't think the Public Safety Committee has had anything specifically tied to Black men.
Okay. Is there anything that's affecting community at this point in time from a public safety standpoint that you can speak to, or even from Homeland Security that we should be aware of?
Well, the only thing is, obviously we have that police reform bill that's pending. We had a lot to do with that, helping draft most of it. So we've got a Senate version that's pending and a House version that's pending. That's in conference committee. I think in general, for most part, everyone's on board with the concepts of it. It's just trying to make sure we get it right. I guess there are some differences between the House and the Senate version, and we're hoping that will they'll work itself out in conference committee so that we can try to get something passed. And see, we're looking at in the committee. We're also looking at drones, legislation dealing with drones. We've got autism training for police. Also in that, in the police reform bill that we have some, the Senate version has some educational components that would require police officers to get some sensitivity training or awareness on racial bias, the history of slavery, and just look at their whole training curriculum to make sure that if there is any institutional racism that's in there, that we try to address it and attack those issues.
Okay, thank you so much for that. So speaking about sensitivity issues for police training, what does that, can you just explain a little bit what some of that looks like? And also, is there anything in there about community experts being involved in what that training could look like? Is there anything in that legislation around that? Or is it just police being able to train other police officers?
Now, what it would be is, what we would do is right now, Massachusetts is, excuse me, right now there's 46 other states that have what's called a Peace Officer Standards of Training, a POST system. Massachusetts is one of 4 that doesn't have it. This would create a POST system where we would have police and I guess you want to call them civilians, or non-law enforcement that would sit on a panel that would discuss the curriculum that should be utilized for our police training. So we would have law enforcement, would have representatives from the Attorney General's office, would have some community, NAA. Well, again, this is where the Senate version has appointees from the NAACP that would be on there. I think the ACLU may have an appointment. So there is a mixture, but the House and the Senate have a different makeup of that committee, but they're in both commissions. I believe both the House version also has some non-law enforcement in there.
Great, appreciate that. And I'm looking in the chat. I'm also going to ask any brothers. Actually, Brother Jamie Wallace, is it okay to unmute you to get you to ask that question? So I don't see him unmuting, so I'll ask it on his behalf. One brother had a question from the chat asking, what does it mean and how do you train someone to be sensitive? So can you, I believe the question is more around like, what does sensitivity training look like currently, or what is being proposed?
Well, right now it's a proposal. The concept behind it would be for law enforcement to be trained in the issues that Black men would be facing, so that when if they're patrolling an area that you reside, and if they have an interaction with a not just Black men but a person of color, that they might understand that there could be some previous interaction with law enforcement that may not have been the appropriate one, just to try to give them a little bit more knowledge of what people of color have gone through over the years, and to try to give them a better understanding of how, if the people are interacting a certain way, why they may be acting that way. And so that the law enforcement, the first reaction is to arrest someone and to go into the court system.
So there's some, I know there's some implicit bias training. Is there anything, is this to sort of like push that a little bit as well? So it's not just the sensitivity towards issues that Black and brown folks or BIPOC folks face, but also to look at how that can inform like implicit bias training and sort of get a better understanding of issues. And also, I'm curious, is there anything around like policing that can be put that might be in any of that legislation as well?
Want to say that again? What was in the legislation?
Is there anything about community policing in that police reform legislation that you're aware of?
No, there's not. There's nothing in there for community policing. I am actually a big advocate of that, but that was something that the committee that was looking at this legislation didn't support.
Okay. It sounds like there's another. Oh, there is another comment in the chat. Brother Noel, would you like to ask that question aloud, please? I would like to see if there's a way to you can frame that. So, and I don't want not represent your question properly.
He's still on mute.
There you go.
Okay. Thank you so much, Matt. With me, for me specifically, when I hear police training, sensitivity training, to me, it sounds like, it's almost like, let me help you understand the role of a Black man, right? I personally think that the training needs to go deeper. I think that the training needs to turn the mirror to the individual, meaning the police officer, so that the police officer understands how he or she, particularly white police officers, can demonstrate compassion for human beings, not necessarily understanding how to cope and deal with Black men and Black boys in the communities for which we live and reside. I just don't think that there's I just don't see or have heard, and I would love for you to speak more about this, Mr. Moore, as to
how the training takes a deep dive and looking at the individual, the police officer, and his and her own individual bias that they may be, you know, extending out in the communities for which they serve.
Well,
I hope I framed the question accordingly.
Yeah, and you know, and this is probably my fault. When I say sensitivity training, that how you word it is pretty much what the goal of it is for the officer to look at how he responds and how he interacts with people of color. Or but with that is also getting understanding of the history and what people of color had to go through, a better understanding of that. And also with that comes them looking at how they would, instead of the officer making an arrest, or have a better understanding of why the interaction may be going a certain way. I don't know if I'm wording this properly for you. So that.
May I ask a follow-up question? I'm so
ahead.
sorry. And
No, go right ahead.
This will be my last question. The follow-up question is, who's conducting this training? Is it a person of color? Is it?
Oh, that hasn't.
Is it a community of color?
You're deeper into this than it's even. Yeah, this legislation is just proposed. So when they when they develop this training, this is where they'll seek input from individuals on the committee or whoever they reach out to, that will look at the depth of the training that it gets into. Right now, this is just a proposal in the legislation that they want to address these areas.
So is there a formal bill yet for that?
There's a bill in the House that passed, and there's a bill in the Senate that passed.
Great. What's the bill? What is the bill?
It's the police reform.
Okay. Is there a bill number so people can search it up and read through it?
There is, but I don't have that with me, so I apologize for that.
No problem. Is it possible, before we get to Brother Porter question, is it possible that you can just type your email in chat so folks who would like to follow up with you can do so?
Say that again?
Type your email in the chat, or just say it out loud for folks, just so we can be sure to follow up and get a good grasp of how to follow up with you and ask those to look at the legislation, or if they just have questions about the committee itself.
Yep, I am typing it in right now.
Great. So as you do that, Brother Porter, I'm going to unmute you. I think you have a great question. I'm going to ask you to ask that out loud.
Thank you. So my name is Gary Porter, and I am on representing the African Diaspora Mental Health Association.
I'm sorry, can you say it again? The African who?
African Diaspora Mental Health Association.
Okay, all right, thank you.
It's a mental health clinic that was pretty much opened up to address the issues that people of color are faced with day to day. But my question for you is, can you articulate to us your understanding of the issues that people of color are faced on a day-to-day by police? I understand that you're involved in this legislation, correct? So can you explain to me what your understanding?
Well, I was in the original drafting of it. There was a group of us.
That's okay. I just wanted to know your understanding.
Well, my understanding it's that, and I'm going to say feel, because I don't have any personal knowledge of having felt this way, but I'm going to say they feel that they're over-policed, that police are, when they are interacting with them, they are not giving them the same respect that they would give someone else, a person of non-color. That even talking to the Minority Police Officers Association that I spoke with, there's internal bias as far as not promoting officers, how they're judged, and that's also something that we're looking at for police. That if a police sees a black man or a person of color in the community, that they don't just assume that they're automatically doing something illegal. I guess to frame it is to give them the same respect that they would provide people of non-color.
I appreciate that. Mr. Park, would you mind if I just gave one suggestion?
Yep, go right ahead.
Sure. Sure. So firstly, I think, Mr. Moore, what you should understand is that people of color are terrified and traumatized by the level of policing. But here's my suggestion. If there could be a form developed, maybe called a stop and search form, whatever that is, where every time a person of color or anybody is stopped by the police have to fill out this form and hand it to the individual that was stopped.
That is actually, Gary, that is actually in that police reform package.
Okay, well, let me just, I haven't seen it.
But in the Senate version, I don't know if it's in the House version.
Okay, so I haven't seen it, but let me finish. And what should be contained in that form is the reason for the stop, the officer that stopped him, the date, the time, and perhaps the CAD record, the computer-aided dispatch record that caused that police officer to stop that individual. Because 9 times out of 10, that does not exist. This is just predatory behavior. And so what I believe would happen from that, there would be a record created, right? And it would also empower the individual being stopped to have a document that they can follow up later on with a complaint.
Okay.
So that would be my suggestion.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate that. Are there any other questions for Senator Moore? Okay, if not, Senator Moore, thank you for your time. I don't see your email in the chat yet. So if you could just pop that in there so we can.
It's sitting right there. It's right underneath Gary Porter.
Okay, gotcha. There it is. All right, thank you so much.
Thank you.
People will definitely follow with your office. Appreciate what you're doing. Thank you for participating, answering some of our questions going forward. We look forward to working with your office in the future.
Okay, great. Thank you.
And please feel free to stay along, read the
No,
chat.
I got a 1:30 I got to be at too now.
Yep.
So thank you.
All right, folks. So I seen before Senator Moore, we were definitely starting to build a little bit. Folks were definitely sharing some sentiments in the chat. We have a few minutes. I'm going to bump up until we get the next set of folks we can ask questions to, which will probably be the Public Health Joint Committee at 1:30. Shout out to the brothers who are still here and the sisters who are still supporting us as well. I know y'all are listening well. I know a couple people ping me on Facebook Live. They're listening, actively participating. There's some folks who also are checking us via email and just checking in on our progress and what we got going on. So shout out to them for that as well. Brothers, how y'all feeling? And when I ask this, I also want to know, like, looking at the poll, which was really cool to see. Are there some things we haven't, or any capacities of things we haven't gotten to that you think is important to talk about? I know some folks were really questioning early on, like economic stuff. I'm hoping that Uzochi is wrapping up the housing group and bring those brothers back in. But I also see that wealth inequality was a big deal. Access to health and healthcare was a big deal. Education. So what else is really pinging at y'all? And I would love to just get that. Oh, housing is done. Everybody's back. Oh, okay. That's awesome. So this is a time where I'm asking, like, if y'all want. Matter of fact, I think we can unmute folks, and if you want to just really chime in on what's important. I see Devin's here from Campbell's office, so shout out to that as well. And just brothers, if y'all if y'all have questions, concerns, or if y'all just want to talk amongst us as community and talk a little bit. I see folks were talking about what they offer or what they want to talk about, but I think police reform is a big deal. There's some folks who are totally against police. Some people think police are just fine as is. And then there's a catchment of us think that and understand that reform is more than important at this point in time. And if it doesn't happen soon, I worry about what will look like for folks going forward. I mean, we've seen what's happening in other places. We see that and understand that, like Brother Porter mentioned earlier, we're over-policed. And that there should be some accountability with the CAD thing, because the calls that come from dispatch don't always reflect what officers' actions do. You know what I'm saying? And that's a big deal. And how do we hold police accountable? I know in some of the legislature for that police reform bill, there was talks of like how to decertify officers. And that's a big deal right now too, because I feel like if folks can't do the job, then they shouldn't have the job. Like just basically, like that job is a choice. I don't want to hear about the blue line or any of that stuff. So it's just really difficult to have that kind of level of accountability, and how we can create that accountability, like from a community standpoint. I know there's a lot of talk about like what community police and police accountability and reform groups and stuff, but how do we really get folks to understand that? Like how do we use our voice collectively as folks who are on the receiving end of when police aren't held accountable for the injustices that they might step over lines and boundaries? And how do we learn the laws so that way we can protect ourselves? Which may seem like a big deal, but or not a big deal, but it really is. Let me see. We got some people popping up in the chat. Oh, I mean, not in the chat. Oh, she's in. Okay. Hello, Ferrante. How are you doing? I'm sorry we missed out on. We're glad to have you with us right now. So another person who chairs economic development and emerging technology is Ann Margaret Ferrante. I'm going to unmute you now. Rep Ferrante, how are you doing?
Thank you. Great. How are you doing this morning?
I'm doing okay. I just want you to take a moment, please introduce yourself, talk about the committee you're on, and if you can speak to anything in legislation, current or has recently passed that will affect or speaks to Black men specifically, it'd be greatly appreciated.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that. So unfortunately, as everybody knows, our economy has been, first of all, actually, let me take a step back. First of all, let me thank you for inviting me to talk to you today. I appreciate the opportunity. And so thank you for joining with us. Unfortunately, as most people are aware, COVID has really hit our economy hard. And right now we're facing anywhere from a $2 to $6 billion deficit within our state finances. So the legislature right now is meeting to figure out how best to protect the programs that help the majority of people. What's really hurting us right now is that Congress hasn't come together to let us know if there's going to be any assistance to the states and how much assistance, if there is any, coming. So right now we're in a very difficult period of trying to figure out how best to work around a deficit that's that big. And to give you an idea, that deficit is bigger than what we faced in the economic downcline of 2008, 2009, 2010 through 2012. So that's a really tough nut for us to crack right now. However, having said that, I serve as the chair of the Economic Development Committee, and that committee has the ability to bond money over time. And so what that means is there are certain investments that we can make that don't spend from the budget side of the ledger, but allow us to go out to bond to make improvements. And what we did with that bill is I personally, in my co-chair, Eric Lesser, met with members of the African American community. And so on my committee is Carlos Gonzalez from Springfield. He's the chair of the Black and Latino Caucus. I also reached out to Nika El Guardo, who's a rep in Boston, African American, as well as China Tyler, who's a representative African American from the Dorchester-Roxbury area. And what we did is we talked about ways that we could invest in the African American community across the state in order to help bring more infrastructure, more job opportunities, and more economic growth. And so those provisions are still moving forward. We also had a lot of discussions with the Urban League and BECMA, and worked with them to develop how best we can create educational opportunities, work opportunities, and entrepreneurial opportunities for folks to start their own businesses. So I know there's some messages coming up in the chat. I'll look at that as well. And I just want to give you an overview in terms of what we're working on, and as you said, what we're doing. I'm going to just type my email address right in here.
Yep.
I know folks have been asking for that. But I was hoping today would be a lot of a conversation about, you know, now that we're in this period of trying not only to deal with economic opportunities, but dealing with them against the backdrop of COVID. Certainly, COVID has hit African American communities harder than most others. I'm really interested in a dialogue of, you know, what we can do to be helpful, and what I, as an ally to the Black community, need to know that I might not know in order to be most helpful.
Okay, well, I think about, and I don't want to just overspeak this piece, but okay, first question that popped up is Greg. Greg, do you want to ask that question, brother?
Good afternoon. How is everybody doing?
Great. How are you doing, Greg? Thank you for joining us today.
You're welcome for asking. You mentioned about how the state can work out bonds for small business. Can you tell me how that works out, please?
Sure. So what happens is there's money that we collect in taxes and by other means that we spend. And that's on the financial side of the ledger. And then on the economic or bonding side, what we do is we determine how much money we want to invest that's not in operational funds, but in infrastructure funds. And so then we put a package together. It's a lot like going before a bank, but instead we go out to the market and we say, here's an amount of money that we need because we want to invest it in Massachusetts. And then investors put up the amount of money that we need. We take that money and then we invest it as we proposed in the bond bill. Does that make sense to you, Greg? And I just want to acknowledge, I just saw Bud Williams popped in here. And I was remiss not to mention that I work closely with Bud and Carlos, and that Bud is actually on my economic development committee too, and a very helpful and insightful voice on our committee.
Oh, they're doing a great job for Western Massachusetts. I'd be remiss if I didn't say that. Those are two of my big brothers right there.
Well, they're two of my favorite brothers too. So thank you for acknowledging Bud's good work.
Yes, ma'am. So, what is the time process of how long this type of transaction would take?
So we're hoping that the House passed its bill and the Senate passed its version of the bill. Now we're in the process of reconciling the two bills. And we're hoping that by the end of the session, which would be probably around the end of November, we would have more information we would have a final bill, and then the treasurer would put that out to the investors So I'm hoping that early January, February, we'd be able to move on some of those initiatives, if not sooner.
Cool. What are you wanting to see happen for the Black and Brown community pertaining to small businesses during the COVID issue that we're having right now?
So I'll tell you what's on my mind right now. I'm very concerned that when I look at who was able to take advantage of the federal PPP and economic development injury loan processes, I don't see a lot of Black and brown businesses there.
I mean, well, that goes to who's actually the people who are approving those loans and
Totally
grants.
agree. Yeah, totally agree, Greg. I was going to add, and what I realized is in working with Bud and Carlos and Nika and China, they've explained a lot to me about how the process was basically outlined in a way that was that put Black and brown businesses at a disadvantage. And so what I'm really hoping is that the state can put together a program that will be able to invest in Black and brown businesses the same way that PPP and the other federal programs were able to invest in other small businesses. And so what we did in the economic development bill is we created a program like that in different forms, hoping that we could get agreement with the Senate so that we would have some opportunities for grants, for loans and support to the African American community. And I don't want to leave out the Latina community too, but to both communities to really be able to support you.
Yeah, so I'm thinking, and I'm calling on behalf of the Western Mass Black Chamber of Commerce.
Yeah.
So we do a lot of programs with a lot of local banks and giving out grants and loans and stuff like that, and Shark Tanks and things like that. So I say that to say that, is there a way that we can involve more banks involved in the situation to get them to speed the process up? Because there is nothing worse than eating a cold dinner, if you know what I mean.
Yep.
Waiting
That's
all day.
exactly the objective. The objective is to work with those banks that are trusted within, so there's three groups, okay? So there's the banks that are trusted within the community. That's really important to work with them. There's also community development financial institutions that we want to work with if they're able to help get the money out, and CDCs, community development corporations. So, I'm very cognizant of the fact that there's some distrust between the big banks and the African American and Latino communities. And so what I want to do is make sure that there are a number of ways that we can deliver assistance to Black and brown businesses. So what we do is really helpful and effective.
I think having your voice and your title would kind of have them move a little faster. Because it's like once they don't have to do anything, like they're not going to do it.
Oh no, my intention is to be on them, because let me just give you my perspective. I need, in order to get through this recovery quickly and equally, I need everybody to be moving forward, and we can't have slackers in this. And so to me, it would be unsuccessful if 70% of the economy starts to recover and 30% of the economy is left behind because people weren't moving fast enough or weren't interested enough. And so I want you to know, and I've said this publicly on a number of occasions, I see my job as being on everybody, especially when we go through the process of getting the funds. The worst thing to me is to make sure we get the funds and then not have the funds distributed to help people. To me, that makes no sense at all. So you can count on me to work with you and to work with others to make sure those funds get distributed to the right places.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. If there are any other questions or comments, please put them in the chat. Again, we're just trying to, I'm gonna keep us on task and on schedule. And we also have our next set of speakers for the next group, which is public health. I just want to again give a big shout out to Rep. Ferrante. Thank you for joining us. Please, can you leave your email in the chat so folks can reach out to your office and follow up with you with any more questions?
Yeah, I just want to make sure I have it right in there. So if anybody wants to, I know Greg still has some question to ask. Greg, if you want to reach out to me, happy to talk to you further and happy to come to your next roundtable to keep the conversation going.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. Brother Greg, I'm sorry about that, man. I just want to keep it rolling. We have a next set of folks in here and we're about to finish as strong as possible. With that said, Public Health is in the building. And the Senate Chair for Public Health, Senator I don't want to say it wrong, so I want to say Comerford. If I'm incorrect, I apologize for that, but please be forgiven. People misspell and don't get names right all the time, and I apologize if I didn't do that justice. And where is this person at? There you go. Had to find you to unmute you.
Hello.
Good afternoon. So as you're joining us, love for you to introduce yourself, talk about the committee you chair, and what work or legislation has been done from that position of the committee or from your office in itself on behalf of Black men specifically or Black community in general.
Absolutely. And first, just let me thank you so much for the opportunity to join you today. I'm really deeply grateful to have this opportunity and thank you so much for your work. My name is Jo Comerford. I'm the Senate Chair of the Joint Committee on Public Health. This is my first term in the legislature, so I've been here for just about 18 months. The district I represent is Western Massachusetts, which is the Hampshire-Franklin-Worcester district. 24 cities and towns, starting out about Northampton, South Hadley in Western Mass, and climbing up the Connecticut River to the Vermont and New Hampshire border. And then we go over to Worcester and then over to Coleraine. So it's a pretty big district, about 675 square miles, and lots of different issues emerging in this district. You know, we have rural towns and we have really super rural small towns, and then we have some smaller cities. So the Joint Committee on Public Health is was such a great first post, I think. I care deeply about public health, and I told the Senate President upon getting in that I wanted to work on the environment, on public education, both K-12, or early childhood, and higher ed, and then on healthcare. I believe in more sort of ambitious healthcare reform overall. I believe in a universally affordable, accessible, or single payer system. But I liked public health because in public health, as you all know, I got to talk about a lot of things like equity, like housing, like access to resources, like wealth, like environmental well-being and environmental racism. All of those, they're all considered social determinants of public health. And the committee this year heard about 476 bills, many of them dealing directly with equity, race and ethnicity equity. And let me just say that everything changed when we started to deal more forcefully in the Commonwealth with COVID-19. COVID-19, as you all know, the pandemic and the economic crisis really laid bare the inequities that we already knew were in the Commonwealth. They didn't tell us anything that we didn't know, but they exposed these inequities for all to see. And I will say that this dealing directly with the pandemic and the economic crisis really accelerated the kind of racial equity work that the Public Health Committee was doing. So I was appointed by the Senate President to chair the COVID-19 working group for the Senate. And we took up a bunch of stuff a bunch of bills that we're going to go. Oh, hello, Rep. Williams, I see you. That we're dealing directly with racial equity, including a bill that's actually established a racial equity task force that is ongoing now, and also looking to collect the right kind of information or data about who was struggling from COVID-19 and why and where, so that the state could dedicate resources. And this was information the state wasn't collecting before the legislature told it to collect it. And of course, if you don't know about a problem or can't see a problem, you can't solve a problem directly and responsibly. So I will say that we have been foregrounding equity. The Senate President also appointed me to the Senate Task Force on Equity, and the first piece of work we're doing there is, is the Reform, Shift, and Build Act, which was our version of the police reform bill that's now in conference committee. There are lots of public health underpinnings in that bill that I worked on. For example, I worked on efforts to accelerate in the Commonwealth a non-police response to mental health and other economic crises like homelessness. So the part that we contributed was an acceleration of social services for folks facing those difficulties, not having police arrive to respond. So not a gun response, but a service response. So I think I'll stop there.
Yep, we have our first question.
Yep, I saw some questions come up and I thought, oh, I should stop and take these questions.
Yep, so I'm gonna unmute you. Bishop, if you want to pose that question that you wrote in the chat out loud.
Certainly. What I wanted to ask is, since police brutality and racism in many studies have clearly been identified as public health issues, particularly when it comes to the African American community, causing stress, trauma, and all kinds of health-related challenges. What is the Joint Committee doing specifically to address and mitigate these issues?
Thank you so much for that question. It's incredibly important. The Public Health Committee did pieces of this overall work around police brutality, but I will say that the real work came in the Senate's working group on racial equity, where I was appointed as Senate Chair of Public Health to work on the Reform, Shift, and Build Act, which, as I was saying, is the Senate's version of police reform. And that's where I inserted this piece of public health work into the larger bill around foregrounding a non-police response to mental health, physical health, economic health crises. I agree with you that that racism is a public health issue, and police brutality and racism go hand in hand, and that there has to be a health response. So that's one example. Another example, I'll just say super quickly, that I'm working on, I worked on this session, and I'm actually going to make it a bigger vision for the next session, which starts in January, is a health equity bill. It would ask every single state agency, or require every single state agency, to look at all of its policies and procedures and budget expenditures through a racial equity lens. And they would have to ask, does this advance or hurt racial equity? And we would have to judge all things by whether or not it advanced racial health equity. And health, again, public health in that big umbrella of all the social determinants of public health. And that would go for the prison system, police, our buildings, and the buildings and appropriations we do, roads, bridges, all of it would have to be looked at from that perspective.
Great.
It's a great question. Thank you so much.
All right. There's another question from Brother Gary Porter again. I'm going to tap you real quick if you want to ask that question aloud. And real quick, someone also requested, and we're going to ask anyway, if you, thank you for responding with your email. Appreciate that.
That's my cell too. So that's my email. I answer, that's my own inbox, and then I answer, that's my phone, my own phone.
Hi, again, Gary Porter from the African Diaspora Mental Health Association. Just to ride Bishop Talbot Swan's question, the mass trial court also have failed to respond to the call for racial equity. Both within the system, there's no racial justice, and that, as you know, we can see through sentencing disparities, et cetera, et cetera. But also for its employees, there's a failure to respond to racial equity. So I was wondering, do you have any thoughts on how you may address that?
No, don't tap me. You're good.
Sorry about that. I muted myself because I had some background noise, and then I caused that problem. So thank you so much. Thank you, Gary. And I also want to thank Bishop Swan for the great question as well, the initial question. With regard to the trial court, I will tell you, I haven't personally talked to the trial court around racial equity. The conversations I have had with the trial court in Western Massachusetts have had to do more with equity around the rural barriers to people accessing the courts equitably, and the economic barriers to people accessing the court economically. I haven't had a direct conversation about racial equity with the courts. With regard to the rural and economic barriers, I'm sure you know this, the courts were slower to pivot to allowing online services and to allowing video hearings, and that just caused both a backup in court cases, but then in my area where there's almost no public transportation to speak of, and what we had was really halted considerably during COVID, it just made people's access to the courts completely impossible. And it became quite alarming for our people. So that's the kind of conversation I've had. But I agree with you that it's worth having that racial equity conversation with the court.
So, and I appreciate that. And I'm just going to say this real quick, just to echo what you've already said. Any conversation being had, if it's not being seen through a racial equity lens, then something's being left off the table. So I'd appreciate when you do have these conversations, if you can lean in and try to figure out what's going on there, and perhaps loop in some of the community partners that would love to be involved in that conversation also.
Thank you. Thank you for that feedback.
Appreciate that, brother. Are there any other questions, comments, or concerns for Senator Comfort? I'm sorry.
Stop. You did great.
I was like, oh, I'm gonna mess up the name like most people do.
No.
It's always funny, like depending on what part of the world you're in, or even around the country, like different accents, or sometimes just a small change in common spelling has you a little unaware of how to pronounce people's names accurately.
I totally get it.
So it happens that way sometime. But if there are no more questions, Senator, thank you for stopping by and chatting with us. We really appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Are you all going to release, and forgive me if you already have, but are you going to release priorities for the next session, bills that you think are the most important, and or budget priorities that you think are the most important? Because I would really love to have them, have your recommendations as we go into the next session.
Absolutely. So one of the things we are going to pivot from today is we're creating, and at least in my shop, we're creating a family of leaders where we lean in with a lot of folks, and we did this partially last year, and that's how with Rep. Williams and some other folks, we were able to get this thing off the ground and really move it forward to get such a response across the state. for folks to step up and be present. But we want to pivot this into Family of Leaders, where we'll be able to look at accurately at what legislation, especially budget items, and make sure that the budget doesn't come out and we're the lens and the fact that the people who need the most help will be reflected in that, because oftentimes when those cuts happen, especially when budget seems tight, especially on a year like this, there's so much happening. We don't want it to be at the expense of those who need the most service programs or just financial help to be able to sustain. And it's interesting because at one point, Massachusetts had like the highest amount of millionaires per capita in the country, right? And the fact that there's still such a growing population of homelessness and there's so many inequities still prevalent right now is just like, it makes no sense. It's like people can come here and thrive, but can't make sure that it's a livable space for everyone, and that's absurd. So we're definitely going to pivot and continue to work on as soon as possible. One of the biggest things we're going to do is November 5th is the next convening we're going to have out of my shop. But there's some other brothers and programs that are doing the work. I know Rep Williams has all the guys out in his side of the state doing a lot of work. Brother Mackey, who was asking for your contact info in the chat, has Brothers Building, and they're doing a lot of work. They're also starting to look at legislation as well. And thank them for being a partner with us and helping get the word out too. Can't say that enough. There's different folks who are going to do the work, and our goal is to come together and make sure that our voices are heard, and we can reflect that by advocating, speaking to folks like you who will continue messaging what that could look like. And if there's some things that you know that's on the table that you want us to take a look at, make sure it seems equitable and fair, and that our voice is involved in that, then we would love to help coordinate that with you as well.
Thank you so much. And I should have shouted out sooner to Rep Williams. Thank you, Representative, for your leadership, your longtime leadership. I didn't see you initially when I came on and I was getting my bearings, but thank you so much, Rep Williams, for everything. Folks probably know that Rep Williams was the powerhouse behind the Juneteenth legislation that was signed by the governor, and I was proud to join the representative on that. So thank you, Rep Williams, for this and all.
I was just going to comment on that, and you stole my thunder.
Oh, I'm sorry.
In terms of your outstanding work on the Juneteenth bill, you and Rep Domes up there, you were very heavy duty on it. You've been on it. You've been a great partner for Western Mass, a great partner for Springfield. And I tell folks, we call ourselves the 413. That's our area code. So thank you for your outstanding work, and looking forward to working with you in the very near future.
Me too, Representative. Absolutely.
Great. So, gentlemen, as we're wrapping up, I want to say the work will continue. I'm going to leave my contact info in the chat as well if you want to follow up. I think it's important that we continue just speaking with each other and sharing concerns, thoughts, and ideas across the state, because though our problems are similar, it's not always the same. And there's some things that might be happening in Western or Southeast or Central Mass that are different from what we're facing in Boston. Similar, but might not be the same. So we should be creating ways to just continue the conversation and find ways to build with each other. And on the important issues that matter, we shouldn't wait, even though we appreciate Rep Williams, we shouldn't wait until he has something on the table to decide to get active. We got to do that amongst ourselves as well. So feel free to just take the last few minutes. I will unmute everyone and if you guys want to talk, if y'all want to chat amongst each other, if you just want to leave contact info inside the chat feed. This is being recorded just so we can post it up, just so I can take notes. The chat is also being saved so we can share contact info from the chat with everyone. And if you did register via Eventbrite, we can send all this out to you via follow-up email in the next few days or week or so as well.
Matt, I just want to say very outstanding. We always feel empowered when men of the same will get together. But I want to give you kudos you and your staff, and Horace, who's been in the background, for doing an outstanding job with this technology piece. I was on Zoom the last 2 or 3 nights trying to get myself tutored, but it's amazing. You pulled it off, and this is just the first step. Now remember, we should get back together before November 3rd. That's election day. The next biggest thing going now is voting, making sure our residents vote, and they continue to vote, and they can early vote starting on Saturday, October 17th. Early voting starts, and ballots have come in the mail. And we can call folks all over the country, not just in Massachusetts, South Carolina, Wisconsin, all those states, Georgia, where we can make a difference. Because remember, the president has put out a call to come into our communities and to look over the voting apparatus, the voting system in our countries. We need to show up and show out. And I think Bishop Swan and Horace are working with other ministers throughout the country. We need to have a response. We need to have a presence on election day. All polls all over the country, they're coming down. I heard they're coming down from New Hampshire. They're coming down from Vermont. They're going to invade Massachusetts. We just need to have a presence in our communities. Show up. Very important. Most important election of our lifetime.
Absolutely. Can't say that enough. So I'm gonna go on a limb and assume everybody is available to vote, is registered to vote, because, and if not, shame, because there are too many. We're standing on the shoulders of giants who fought and something even died for the will and for the right to vote. And at least we can do is pay homage to those who stood before us and exercise that right in some way, shape, or fashion. Can't say that enough. That's just from me to y'all, and I know y'all share the same sentiments. Also, thank you to my crack staff. Thank you, Sharon and Zochi. Couldn't done it without them. And if you want to be added to our newsletter that goes out average once a month for the most part, please just shoot Sharon an email. She'll make sure you get added. And with that said, it's about 2 o'clock. So I thank everybody for y'all presence, for y'all energy. And if y'all need anything at all, please feel free to shoot me an email. This will be available for public display at some point. Thank y'all so much, brothers. And let's continue doing the work.